Before we begin, subscribe so you never miss another sleepless night. Now, let's begin. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was halfway through a shift that already felt twice as long as it should. Working nights at the gas station off Highway 43 had its routine: clean the coffee station, restock the chips and candy, and try not to let the silence get under your skin. But it always did. The place sat far enough from town that most nights you could go 15 or 20 minutes without seeing another car. Outside, the parking lot was lit by a single flickering street lamp, the kind that hummed and made the shadows jump every few seconds. The asphalt was cracked, and weeds pushed through in places no one bothered to fix. On windy nights, you could hear the sign creak on its rusty chain, even from inside. I'd been here long enough to know every sound: the steady hum of the refrigerators in the back, the faint buzz of the lights overhead, even the occasional click from the old clock above the register. It was the kind of quiet that made those small noises seem huge, almost intrusive. Around 1:50, I'd stepped out to take the trash to the dumpster behind the building. The air outside was cold enough to bite, and the smell of gasoline mixed with damp asphalt. No headlights on the highway, no sounds except the wind. When I came back in, I made a fresh pot of coffee, more for the smell than because anyone was going to drink it. A few minutes later, the automatic door beeped. That sharp chime always cuts right through me, even when I'm expecting it. This time, I wasn't. I turned, wiping my hands on a rag, and saw him, tall, lean, dark hoodie pulled low over his face. He didn't say anything, didn't even nod in acknowledgement, just walked inside, slow and deliberate, hands buried in the front pocket of his hoodie. "Evening," I said, more out of habit than friendliness. No answer. He moved into the first aisle, and at first, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just tired, maybe a trucker coming off a long haul. But as I pretended to straighten the shelves, I noticed something odd. He wasn't looking at the products. Instead, he'd take a few slow steps, stop, turn his head toward the front windows, and stare outside. Not a quick glance 10, maybe 15 seconds each time. Then he'd move to the next aisle and do it again, always stopping, always looking. My eyes drifted up to the security monitor above the counter. The grainy black and white feed caught him in those moments of stillness, and the lack of movement made him look almost like a statue. The longer I watched, the more I realized his pacing between the aisles wasn't random. It was methodical, like he was timing something. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd seen my share of odd customers at night, but my hands felt cold, even though the store was warm. After a few minutes, the phone rang, the old landline we kept behind the counter. It startled me more than it should have. I picked up, and there was no one on the other end, just faint static. When I hung up and looked up again, he was gone from the aisle I'd last seen him in. My stomach tightened. Then I saw him at the far end of the store, standing perfectly still, looking out the window again. I glanced outside. The road was empty, completely empty. 5 minutes passed like this. Him moving slowly, stopping, staring. Finally, he began walking toward the counter. My pulse kicked up, but instead of stopping, he walked straight past me, through the door. The beep sounded loud in the quiet. I stepped out from behind the register, pretending to check the coffee station, but really just to see what he was doing. He didn't get into a car, didn't head for the pumps. He stopped right at the edge of the sidewalk under the street lamp, and just stood there, head tilted slightly toward the highway. No cars, no sound but the wind rattling the old sign. After maybe a minute, he turned and walked along the side of the building, disappearing into the dark. I waited, thinking maybe he'd come back around the other side. He never did. I locked the door, even though we weren't supposed to. The rest of the shift was uneventful, but I kept checking the cameras, replaying those moments when he was inside. In the footage, his stillness seemed worse, more deliberate. 2 nights later, a police officer came in. Asked if I'd seen anyone matching a description: tall, dark, hoodie, late 20s or early 30s. I told him I had, and pulled up the footage. He watched it without speaking, but his jaw tightened. The man, he said, was wanted for questioning in connection with the disappearance. A cashier at another gas station 30 miles down the same highway had vanished during her shift. The cameras there caught him inside, standing by the window, staring out at the empty road, just like here. And then she was gone. Before leaving, the officer asked me one thing. Did you ever see what he was looking at? I told him no, but the truth is, I never really looked, and now, every time I work the night shift, I find myself staring out those same windows, wondering if one day I'll see it too. I used to work the night shift at a small roadside motel just off Interstate 9. It wasn't glamorous, not even close. The kind of place you drove past without thinking twice. 2 floors, 22 rooms, a faded sign that flickered when the wind picked up. Most nights, the parking lot had more empty spaces than cars, and the front desk felt like an island cut off from the rest of the world. The lobby was barely more than a waiting area. 2 worn armchairs, a chipped coffee table with old magazines, and a coffee machine that made a sound like it was dying every time you pressed the button. From the desk, I could see through the glass doors straight out to the lot, the glow from the overhead lamps casting everything in a tired orange light. It was quiet, so quiet, that sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the dark road beyond the lot, wondering what was out there that I couldn't see. Night shifts followed the same rhythm. After midnight, guests were either in their rooms or long gone, and I'd spend hours doing paperwork, wiping down counters, or killing time online. The occasional late check-in broke the monotony, but otherwise it was me, the hum of the vending machine, and the faint ticking of the lobby clock. That night, the air outside had the kind of chill that made you wish you'd brought gloves. The parking lot pavement was glazed with a thin layer of frost, making the light from the lamps shimmer. Inside, the heater was working overtime, and the lobby smelled faintly of stale coffee. It was 3:10 a.m. when I heard the knock. It wasn't normal. Guests arriving late usually knocked quick and loud, impatient to get in. This was slow. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. The sound seemed deliberate, almost measured, like whoever was out there wanted to make sure I heard them and to make me wait. I stepped around the desk and approached the doors. A man stood just outside, wearing an oversized coat with the hood pulled low. His posture was strange, stiff, his shoulders hunched slightly forward, hands deep in his pockets. The light from the lamps barely caught his face. I pushed the door open a few inches and asked, "Need a room?" For a few seconds, he didn't answer. His eyes moved past me, scanning the lobby slowly, the chairs, the counter, even the hallway to the rooms. Then, he leaned in just enough for me to hear him and said, in a low, steady tone, "You shouldn't be here tonight." It wasn't the words alone, it was how he said them. Not like a warning, more like he was stating something inevitable. Before I could reply, he stepped back and walked away, his footsteps crunching faintly on the frost. I stood there, my hand still on the door, watching him move toward the far end of the lot until he disappeared behind a parked pickup. When I finally closed and locked the door, my pulse was still high. I told myself he was just drunk. Maybe high, maybe a local eccentric, but the way he'd looked past me, it didn't feel random. 20 minutes passed, and I'd almost convinced myself it was nothing. Then the phone on the front desk rang. It startled me. I picked up and said the motel's name. No response. Just faint static, like a weak radio signal. I hung up slowly, glancing toward the doors. The lot looked empty. Then, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. One of the security monitors on the wall showed the hallway leading to room 14. At the far end, half in shadow, stood a figure. Even with a grainy quality, I recognized the hood of that coat. He was facing the door to room 14, standing perfectly still. My first thought was to grab the master key and check, but something in my gut told me not to. Instead, I watched. A full minute passed, maybe more. He didn't knock, didn't try the handle. Then, slowly, he stepped closer to the door until he was right outside it. I thought about calling the police, but before I could move, he turned away and walked toward the far end of the hall, away from the lobby cameras. The feet flickered, and then he was gone. Room 14 was occupied by a single woman, mid-30s, who had checked in earlier that evening. She came down in the morning to check out, her face pale, her voice quiet. When I asked if everything was okay, she hesitated before saying someone had tried to open her door twice during the night. The handle rattled, but when she looked through the peephole, no one was there. I didn't tell her what I'd seen, just nodded, wished her safe travels, and watched her drive off. Later that morning, I reviewed the hallway footage again. It showed the man clearly this time, his slow walk down the hall, his pause outside her door. But after he turned away, he didn't head toward the lobby. He went toward the emergency stairwell that led to the back parking lot. The last frame before he vanished showed his head turning toward the camera. Not a glance, more like he was looking directly at me. I froze the image, and even in black and white, the shadow under his hood didn't hide the fact that he was smiling. I worked 3 more months at that motel before finding another job. I never saw him again. But on my last night there, I walked past room 14 one final time. The door handle was shiny from wear, like it had been rattled one too many times. And even now, when I'm in a quiet hallway alone, I sometimes hear those 3 slow knocks and wonder if one night I'll open the door and find him waiting. A few years ago, I was working as a security guard for a distribution warehouse just outside of town. It wasn't glamorous 12-hour night shifts, sitting in a cramped office watching security monitors and making rounds through aisles of towering metal shelves stacked with pallets. The building was massive, with high ceilings and long, echoing corridors that made even the smallest sound carry. The warehouse was surrounded by an empty lot on 3 sides and a patch of overgrown woods at the back. At night, the place felt completely cut off from the world. We had a skeleton crew during the day, but after 10 p.m., it was just me until the morning shift arrived. It was the kind of job where boredom could wear you down, but the silence could make you paranoid. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the faint whir of the ventilation system, even the creak of the office chair, it all became louder when there was nothing else to hear. Most nights, I kept myself occupied with coffee and the occasional walk through the building just to break the monotony. This particular night was colder than usual. The air in the warehouse seemed to hang still, almost heavy. I'd just finished my first patrol checking the loading docks, the side entrances, the storage aisles when I settled back in the office, a small room tucked in the corner near the main doors. From there, I had a bank of 12 security monitors showing different parts of the facility. Around 2:45 a.m., I heard its footsteps. Slow, heavy. Not the quick echo of my own boots, but a steady, deliberate pace. They were faint at first, but definitely coming from the far end of the warehouse. I stared at the monitors, expecting to see movement on one of the cameras. Nothing, just still aisles and the static glow of the overhead lights. I told myself it could be the building settling, or maybe something falling from a pallet. Still, I took the flashlight from the desk, clipped my radio to my belt, and stepped into the main aisle. The warehouse always felt different when you were walking through it alone at night. The shelves loomed above me like dark walls, and the air smelled faintly of dust and cardboard. As I made my way toward the back, the sound of my footsteps echoed off the concrete. But every few seconds, I'd stop convinced I just heard another set following me. I checked the side rooms first, the packaging area, the maintenance closet, the break room, all empty. Halfway down the main aisle, I stopped and listened again. Silence. I was about to turn back when I caught a flicker of movement on my right. Something small, quick, maybe a shadow shifting as the lights buzzed overhead. I shined my flashlight, but the beam only illuminated the rows of shrink-wrapped boxes and the narrow space between shelves. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting for something. When nothing happened, I told myself it was in my head and headed back to the office. The monitors greeted me with the same still images as before. I took a sip of coffee, leaned back in the chair, and let the quiet settle again. Then, movement. On camera 7, the loading dock, a figure stood just inside the doorway, facing the camera. Tall, broad-shouldered, completely still. The angle was from above, so I could only see the top of the head and the line of the shoulders. I blinked, leaned closer. Something about the stillness was wrong, like he wasn't frozen mid-move, but intentionally holding that position. I turned toward the window next to my desk, which looked out onto the loading dock from the side. Nothing. The space was empty. When I looked back at the monitor, the feed was black. No static, no glitch, just an absence. Like the camera had been switched off. I tried the controls, flipping through views, but camera 7 wouldn't come back online. The others worked fine. I sat there for a while, telling myself it had to be a technical issue, but my eyes kept drifting to the monitors, expecting to see that figure appear somewhere else. At 3:20, I decided to do another patrol. Part of me wanted to prove there was nothing there. Part of me wanted to know for sure. The warehouse was colder now. My flashlight beam cut through the aisles, dust motes, drifting lazily in the light. Every so often, I'd stop and listen, and once or twice, I thought I heard faint breathing. It was probably just the air vents, I told myself. Probably. I made it to the loading dock. The big rolling door was shut, locked tight. The keypad by the side entrance showed no recent entries. Everything looked normal. Still, I kept glancing over my shoulder as I walked back toward the office. When I got there, camera 7 was back online, but the timestamp had skipped. There was no recording between 2:53 and 3:18. Just a gap like that part of the night had been erased. The rest of the shift was uneventful. I left when the day guard arrived, not mentioning what I'd seen. Part of me thought I'd imagined it, that fatigue had played tricks on me. 2 days later, I came in for my shift and found a note from the day manager. Someone had been on site after hours. They knew, because one of the exterior motion sensors had tripped the one near the woods behind the building at exactly 3:19 a.m. No one was scheduled to be there. When they checked the exterior camera, the file was missing. I didn't stay much longer at that job. But even now, sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet place, I think about that figure on the loading dock, the way it stood, motionless, facing the camera, and I can't help wondering if it was watching me or waiting for me. Which of these stories kept you up the most? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be here for the next long night.